Howdy y'all, this is my review of Redneck Rampage for PC and Mac. This here is a first-person shooter by Zetrix Entertainment, who you'd later know as Grey Matter Interactive. They developed, of course, Return to Castle Wolfenstein, Call of Duty United Offensive, but before that they were Zetrix Entertainment, and they made a few other games, including this one, and of course Kingpin Life of Crime, if you ever heard of that one. This one was released in 1997 and published by Interplay back in the day, and it later got released on Mac. And it's interesting for, well, the main reason being it's one of those classic build engine games, so right off the bat you expect it to be in the same league as Duke Nukem 3D, Shadow Warrior, and of course Blood. But it's also one of the only redneck themed games I can think of. And that right there makes it worth taking a look at. And how do they implement that into the game? Is it offensive as hell or what? Because let's face it, rednecks, well, they aren't exactly the most politically correct of folk. Believe it or not, that really wasn't that far from the way I talk whenever southern people are around me. Anybody who has a southern accent, I actually start kind of talking like that. And I can't help it. It drives me crazy. And yet when I talk to people who aren't from the South or from the backwoods of places where they start talking like this, well, my voice just ends up being normal, and that's what you normally hear on the channel. So I do apologize for that, but this game brings out my inner redneck sometimes, and it drives me crazy. Now that said, let's go ahead and get into the actual review here and try to regain some of my dead brain cells. And of course we're going to start with presentation as usual, and what we have here is of course a build engine game, and it definitely looks like one. It's all 2D sprite work, and some of it looks really good and other parts of it look terrible, and there's not really a lot of in between. So while things like, say, your first person weapons look alright in terms of just the artwork, the animations are really awkward and sluggish and look terrible. Except in the case of the shotgun, oddly enough, it's really amusing how that gets reloaded. You quite literally just open the shotgun with its break action, let the shells fly up, and then fly back into the shotgun before closing it. It looks ridiculous, but it kind of sums up what they did with the visuals and with the game in general. It's definitely not meant to be taken remotely seriously. And the visuals definitely reflect that. While you do have quite a lot of browns and grays in this, because a lot of this game takes place in swamps and things like that, you still have a variety of things that just kind of look ridiculous and cartoonish, and particularly when the aliens get involved, they look kind of absurd. I mean, you got aliens that fling turds at you, so that should tell you something right off the bat. But, like I said, the visuals just aren't very consistent. Some of the things look fine, other things look absolutely terrible, and more leans toward the terrible than the good, unfortunately. And that's partly just because everything just looks muddy and washed out in a lot of spots because of the lack of color. And, of course, you've got the whole problem of it being a build engine game from 1997, so it's aged. And that hasn't exactly helped either. And as far as the build engine games go, this is not one of the better looking ones anyway. So there is that to contend with. But then there's the sound design, which considerably makes up for that. You got some very beefy sound effects that work really, really well. Some of them are kind of stock sounds that have been cornied up a bit, if that makes any sense. So they do sound a bit more outlandish than they normally do, just being kind of weird stock sounds. And the voice acting kind of steals the show here, because it's all completely ridiculous and just corny as hell. The guy who's playing who you play as, which is Leonard, has just this wonderful redneck voice. And the things he's saying are just downright ridiculous. Things like when you pick up, say, a powerful weapon, he'll say things like, "I'm on you like stink on shit." And just the gleeful stupidity of both Leonard and, of course, his friend Bubba are just wonders to behold. And as you're going through the game, you can't help but crack a smile sometimes, just because of the voice acting, but also because of the other things that are going on. And that really does lend it a lot of charm. And then there's the soundtrack, which I don't really get anything out of because I'm not really into the whole rockabilly kind of thing. But if you like that, then you could do a lot worse in this game. At least the music isn't the kind of country crap that I really, really hate. Because I really hate country music. And this certainly isn't country music. So they do certainly have that going for it. Although there is one really big problem with it. It's extremely loud, and there's no way to turn it down in game other than just turning it off entirely. So that is a bit of a problem, because when the music is blaring, you can't hear what's going on. And honestly, it's loud enough that it kind of hurts my ears. So there is that. Of course, what obviously matters the most here are the story and the gameplay, except that there's basically no story in this thing. You play as Leonard, and he and his brother Bubba are fighting through an alien invasion which has cloned some of their neighbors over and over and over again so that they're evil clones that will fight them, and they're basically just trying to track down their prized pig. And that's pretty much your entire story. It's ridiculous and it's stupid, and you're not supposed to take it at all seriously. As far as the rest of the writing goes, a lot of what Leonard is saying in various situations is fairly amusing, and there are some jokes here and there that are actually rather funny, but by and large there's not really much in the way of writing here. It's just these kind of incidental moments where it just decides, hey, we're going to do a joke here, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But most of the time it's actually a pretty funny game. And that does lend a lot of charm to it, but what really matters here is, of course, the gameplay, because like all of the Build Engine games, it's very low on story and very high on gameplay. So, what do you got here? Well, if you've played other Build Engine games, it's going to be both familiar and wildly different to you. Familiar in the general control scheme, it's basically the same stuff. And of course, the capabilities of the level design are certainly an advantage of the Build Engine, but there are some problems. For example, the health system takes a lot of getting used to and is both a weird way of doing it, a sensible way of doing it given the setting, and also extremely irritating. You see, instead of getting med packs or whatever, you get food and you get alcohol, and this all heals you. Now, if you drink too much alcohol, you get drunk, and that screws up all your controls, which gets infuriating, I might add. So basically what ends up happening when you get drunk is that you're just going to kind of walk sideways, and eventually if you get drunk enough, your screen will get extremely pixelated to simulate blurred vision. And it's just irritating, because you can't do anything if you're drunk in this game. You can try, but you're going to fail miserably. And when you inevitably get drunk because the only healing item you could find was, of course, alcohol, well, it gets pretty annoying. The gut meter also fills up over time, and the higher it gets, the more flatulent you are, which is just silly and at the same time really annoying. Because honestly, fart jokes are not really that funny. It's one of those things you just kind of go, huh, at, and then you're done. And the game does it constantly. So it actually gets pretty annoying. Also a fun note, if you actually stand still when your character farts, he will actually move a slight bit. It's kind of weird, actually. You don't really notice it if you're just running around, but if you're standing still, it'll happen. But of course the idea is that you need to balance out your gut meter and your alcohol meter. I don't know why they didn't just say gut and liver, but oh well. And so if you balance them out more, then you're going to counteract the effects of the alcohol and you won't get drunk as easily. But it's fairly easy to just go too far in the alcohol direction and get drunk. So you do have to be very, very careful with that. And it actually takes quite a while for the meters to go down. So the health system is really more of a hindrance than anything else. And of course it gets even worse when I tie it into this next bit. Enemies can do wildly inconsistent damage to you. Sometimes they will shoot you from a mile away and do ridiculous amounts of damage with a shotgun. Other times they'll be right in your face and miss entirely. it's downright infuriating at times because you're sitting there and you'll just get sniped from across the map and have no idea where the enemy is, and it turns out they're hidden behind a secret wall or something, and you can't see them, but they can see you and they can hit you from that far away, and they'll still do a lot of damage, or they won't do a lot of damage. I've had guys hit me from near point blank with a shotgun, and it did less damage than the guys who have the revolvers. And at the same time, I've had the shotgun guys one-shot me before. And that's on level 1. On medium difficulty, which is the second difficulty setting. There are 3 settings higher than that. So, where I could play things like Duke Nukem 3D and Shadow Warrior and even Blood on higher difficulty settings, I can't play this thing on anything higher than medium, and even medium kicks my ass. So, that should tell you something right off the bat. The game is just unfair. And it really doesn't help that the damage you can dish out is wildly inconsistent as well. Sometimes you'll hit a guy point blank with a shotgun blast and it'll one-shot him. Other times you'll hit him point blank with a shotgun blast and it will not even do much of anything. And it'll take you 2, 3, 4, sometimes more than that. It's kind of ridiculous, actually. And certain enemies where it should just be fairly easy to take them down might take a good 8 to 10 shotgun blasts to bring them down. And I'm talking like full double barrel blasts, which is of course achieved by holding down the fire button instead of just clicking it. But it's just absurd how much damage enemies can take. So you're going to want to use the more powerful weapons that you get much later in the game. Only one problem. You don't really get all that much ammo for them. And so you're going to want to save them for the particularly powerful enemies who just take ridiculous amounts of damage to bring down. So you're going to save up your ammo, and then you're going to waste it all on them and not have any left for any of the other guys. And it's just baffling how useless some of the weapons are, whether it be just because of the lack of ammunition, or in the case of the revolver, how ridiculously slow the fire rate is and how incredibly low damage it does, or the shotgun, in which how ridiculously wide the spread seems to be and how ridiculously close range you have to be for it to actually do any proper damage. And only the revolver and the shotgun are weapons you get plenty of ammo for. So when you're running through these levels and you're just getting your ass handed to you because you can't dish out the pain like they can, well, that just gets irritating and infuriating. It's not entertaining. And then there's the absolute worst thing this game does, which is the level design. You see, there is this concept that level designers need to abide by, and that is called flow. The map has to flow properly. There has to be this kind of logical progression from one part of it to the next. Which is why, for example, levels in Doom feel so great to go through, because they have a good flow. And if you extend this to other games, like, for example, build engine games, typically if you're playing Duke 3D or Shadow Warrior or Blood, then the levels flow really well. There's just this kind of natural progression that, for the most part, is followed. Sometimes you have to do some backtracking, but it makes sense. And there's a very clear path. In Redneck Rampage, it's more likely than not going to have you go to one end of the map, go back to the other end of the map, then go back to the other end of the map, and maybe go back to the other end of the map yet again. And you just constantly go back and forth and just run all over the damn place looking for keys. And all 3 of the keys look exactly the same. So, when you find that you need at least 3 keys for basically every single level in the game, and it's going to just turn into a key hunt the entire game, where some of them even require you to basically employ secret logic, where, for example, there's one part where you have to go into a doghouse and hit the use key to activate the elevator that's hidden in there. And that's how you find one of the keys. And it's not treated as a secret, it's just a normal part of the level. This kind of thing happens all the damn time, and it's downright infuriating. The levels do not flow. It's just this kind of stilted mess of environments that they threw a bunch of enemies in and said, you know what? We don't know what we're doing, so we're just going to kind of make them monster boxes and try to make them make some sort of sense in terms of what the actual environment is. And what they've managed to do with that is you have these environments that are mostly believable in terms of just general layout and what they are. For example, there's things like a lumber mill or junkyard and things like that. But the way they've designed the levels, it feels like they just had no clue what they were doing from a level design standpoint. And so you have this kind of weird dichotomy between the actual level design and the art design, where the art design makes perfect sense, but the level design is nonsensical, stupid, and infuriating. And that's what this game comes down to in a nutshell. It's just infuriating. If you can somehow manage to get past all the gameplay problems, you might find the sense of humor rather entertaining, because it is certainly a funny game and it's not supposed to be taken remotely seriously. But at the same time, the gameplay is just so faulty that as a first-person shooter, it just fails miserably. And so I really can't recommend this thing. I'll still have a link in the video description box where you can pick this up if you really want to torture yourself with it. But it is of course worth noting that the version I'm going to link to you guys is the GOG version, which also includes Suckin' Grits on Route 66 and Redneck Rampage Rides Again, which are the expansion pack and the sequel, respectively. So at least you're getting more than just the base game for your money, but ultimately I really can't recommend this thing. Thanks for watching.